Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode in our course of moral philosophy. Today, we'll take a look at the deontological theories. What do they mean, and what implications do they have for us? So, without any further delay, let's directly dive in. So, what is the meaning of deontology? So, deontology comes from two Greek words. Okay, and which are those? Firstly, is deon, which means duty, moral obligation, what ought to be done, and what is morally binding. And we know that logos, or this logy here, means study, science, or reasoned explanation. Therefore, deontology refers to the study of duty or the science of moral obligation. So that's the literal meaning of deontology, the study of duty or the science of moral obligation. Now, what does deontological ethics focus on? Well, we see that it deals with mainly duties, obligation, rules, responsibilities, commitments, etc. And it asks the question, what is my duty? Rather than what will happen if I do this. So already we see here it is more duty based, okay, and it is definitely not result oriented. Now, what is the central idea of deontological ethics? So, the central claim of deontological ethics is an action is morally right or wrong depending on whether it follows moral rules or duties, not on its consequences. So, an action is right or wrong, good or bad, depending on whether the moral rules have been followed or no, rather than looking for the consequences of the action. So we see here that this means even if an action produces good results, it can still be morally wrong. For example, person helping the poor but with the motive or the intention of you know gaining popularity or for self praise, etc., it is morally wrong. On the other hand, we see that if an action leads to suffering or loss, it can still be morally right. For example, you tell the truth, okay, about some kind of illegal activity that is going on in your office. People may condemn you, they'll stop talking to you, you may be fired, okay. It may lead to a loss of your job, but still it is morally right because it is your duty to always stick to the truth. With this, we can have two co-claims of more deontological theory. One is rule based morality, and the other one is an unconditional obligation. So let's take a look at these two in detail. So, what do we understand by rule based morality? So, according to deontology, an action is judged by rules of conduct, by moral laws and duties, and it is not judged by results, outcome, or consequences. For example, lying is wrong because it breaks the rule of truthfulness. Now, whether it helps someone temporarily or it saves somebody, that is a different question. That doesn't come under deontological ethics. For deontological ethics, lying is wrong because it breaks the rule of truthfulness. You are not supposed to tell lies. It breaks that rule, hence, the action is wrong. Now, let's see what is unconditional obligation. So here we see that some actions are obligatory. They must be done. Under all conditions, they must be done. They are necessary and they are categorically imperative. That means they are binding in all situations. There is no escape from this. So, in this way, we see that such actions must be done regardless of the results. So, whatever may be the consequences, whatever may be the outcome, you must do it. Because of this, we see that deontological ethics is also called as a formalist theory. Why? Because it emphasizes on fixed moral laws, and moral values here come from obedience to the law, not from success or happiness. Okay, so as long as you obey the law, it means that you are doing what is good according to deontological ethics. Now we can easily compare deontology with consequentialism. Okay, so we see that deontology will focus on duty. Your duty is to tell the truth. Consequentialism will focus on the results. What is the result? You need to be happy, so hence you can compromise on the truth. Deontology will ask the question, is it right? Okay, telling the truth, is it right? Yes. Consequentialism will ask, does it produce good outcome? Has it led to the happiness of others? So here rules are binding in deontology. In consequentialism, rules can be broken. So in deontology, we see that intention matters, whereas in consequentialism, it is the consequences that matter. For example, deontology will outright say that lying is wrong. But consequentialism will say that lying can be allowed. Okay, remember the word here used is allowed, not right, but allowed. So lying may be allowed if it brings more good than harm. So this is basically the difference that we have between deontology and consequentialism. One focuses on the duty, other focuses on the results. Moving on, let's take a look at the law-centered nature of deontological ethics. So now, deontological theories, we see, judge actions from the viewpoint of law. Okay. Now, since everything is judged from the point of view of law, a morally right action is the one that follows the moral law, and similarly, a morally wrong action is the one that breaks the moral law. So, what is the moral language we use? Right or wrong? Okay, something is right, something is wrong. Now, this is very different from virtue ethics. Why? Because virtue ethics will use terms like good, bad, excellent, etc. In deontological ethics, it's a clear cut right or wrong. You follow the moral law, action is right. You break the moral law, action is wrong. Now, what kind of law is meant here? Okay, so in a way, different deontological theories will understand law differently. Now, first we need to understand what are the possible sources of moral law. You have one, divine law, commands of God; two, rational law, that is discovered by human reason. Kant is one of the proponent. Natural law, based on human nature; social or legal rules, those accepted by society; and conscience, which is your inner moral voice. Now let's take a look. Now it's important here to understand that all deontologists agree that morality is about duty and law, but they may differ what the law is, how the law is, and why the law is binding. Now, when deontologists say follow the moral law, they may be referring to different kinds of laws. So let's take a look at the first one, that is divine law or the commands of God. So divine law means that moral rules come from God. An action is right because God commands it, action is wrong because God forbids it. And hence here duty is obedience to God's will. Example, do not kill, or do not steal, or love your neighbor. And a believer may say, I must not lie because God has commanded truthfulness. So, what is the key idea here? Law comes from outside the human person, and the moral obligation exists because God has authority over human beings. However, what is the limitation? We see that the limitation is that philosophical ethics does not assume God's existence. Therefore, we need to look for non religious foundations of moral law. So, already in the last class, we have dealt with this uh, foundation of moral law. The second is rational law discovered by human reason. So, according to thinkers like Immanuel Kant, moral law is not given by God or society, it is discovered through human reason. Hence, every rational person can know it. So, here morality is based on logical consistency and universality. So, what is Kant's idea in simple words? What's right for one person must be right for everyone in the same situation. For example, lying is wrong because if everyone lied, truth would disappear. Therefore, we cannot universalize lying. So, a person says, I must tell the truth not because of the fear of punishment, but because reason tells me that it is my duty to tell the truth. So, here the law comes from reason, and we are morally bound because we are all rational beings. Next is the moral law. Now, this moral law we see is based on human nature. So, natural law basically holds that moral law is rooted in human nature itself. By understanding what it means to be human, we know what is right and wrong. Why? Because humans, we naturally seek life, truth, society, social relations, love, and justice. Actions which support this are morally right. For example, caring for children is morally good because we are naturally social and nurturing beings. Why? Murder is wrong. Why? Because it destroys human life, which is naturally valuable. So, therefore, a person might say stealing is wrong because it goes against human social harmony. So, here we see that natural law will believe that law itself is rooted in human nature, and therefore it is a moral duty to do what helps humans to flourish. Next is, as we see, social or legal rules. Now, these are the ones that are accepted by society. So, here we see that moral law is understood as rules accepted and enforced by society. So, this will include customs, tradition, laws, as well as social expectations. So, right and wrong are determined by social agreement. So, we come to an agreement as to what is right, what is wrong. For example, obeying traffic rules. Okay, so everyone agrees that you need to obey traffic rules. Paying taxes, again, this is something that is agreed on by everyone. A person may say, I should not bribe because it is illegal and socially condemned. So here we see that the law comes from society, and the moral obligation exists because breaking the law harms social order. So therefore we can, what is the limitation here? Social rules can change, okay, and sometimes they can be unjust. For example, caste discrimination, social rule which is unjust. The apartheid again is unjust. Ultimately we come to the conscience, which we call as the inner moral voice. So conscience basically refers to an inner sense of right or wrong, something telling you, oh, this is right, this is wrong. A personal moral awareness. We can also call it the inner voice that says this is right, this is wrong. So it guides a moral decision making from within. For example, when we feel guilty after lying, or when we feel guilty after cheating somebody, okay, even if nobody comes to know, still there is that inner guilt. Your conscience will prick you. Sometimes feeling compelled to help, even when you're in distress, you feel sometimes that you should go out of your way and help. That is your conscience that is telling you to help. So a person may say that I cannot do this. My conscience does not allow me to do this. So here we see that the key idea is that the law is internal and moral duty comes from your personal moral awareness. Hence, we see that conscience must be formed and educated, or if it is not formed or educated, it can be mistaken. Now, let's take a look at the key features of deontological ethics. So, first we see that it is duty oriented. Actions are done because they are duties, they are not done for reward, pleasure, or success. Example, returning a lost wallet is done because it is your duty and not because you ex- expect a praise or a reward. Next, it is rule governed. So, moral life follows fixed rules, and rules apply to everyone equally. So, therefore, do not steal. This applies to everyone equally. Nobody is exempt from it, and this applies at all times. Non consequentialism. Consequences do not decide morality when it comes to deontological ethics. Speaking the truth is right even if it causes embarrassment. Next is obligation based. So, actions here are classified as obligatory, must be done, forbidden, must not be done, and permitted, allowed but not compulsory, but again permitted in certain situations. For example, keeping promises is obligatory, must be done at all times. Murder is forbidden, okay, should not be done at all. Charity, okay, depending on the situation, depending on whether it is possible for you or no, charity can be done. So, but we see that deontological ethics is mainly about doing one's duty. It will ask the question, is this action right or wrong? Okay, so now we can basically say that Kant is known as the best known deontologist. Why? Because he said that moral law is known through reason and it can be expressed in the categorical imperative, that is, act ac- only according to the rule which you can will it to become a universal law. For example, if everyone lied, truth would collapse. Therefore, lying is morally wrong. So, therefore, as we come to an end of this episode of deontological ethics, we see that it mainly focuses on duty and obligation. It judges actions as right or wrong. It gives priority to law over consequences. And therefore, some actions are unconditionally binding. And it is also called as the formalist ethics. Okay, so ultimately, how do we define deontology? We say that a deontological theory holds that moral rightness depends on obedience to the moral law or duty. Some actions are compulsory and obligatory regardless of their consequences. So, with this, we come to the end of this episode of deontological theory. We shall meet next time with some other theory. So, till then, do good and be duty based.